The kind of implementation of the strategy pattern that we've just built is kind of classic, and it's very convenient for us to be able to change things at runtime. So at runtime, you can change the output format from one to another, thereby changing the overall operation of the entire text processor. And the text processor might be doing other things which do not relate directly to the strategies being used. Maybe some of the parts are common to both HTML and Markdown, like for example, making sure that the quotes and the angled brackets are correct, for example. So we can also envisage a scenario where we don't really need the dynamic flexibility. We do want to be able to define different strategies for the text processor to take, but we always know which strategy we want at compile time as opposed to runtime. And in this case, having a method like setOutputFormat is no longer necessary. We no longer need it because we can statically define what kind of strategy we want. Now the question is, how do you pass that in? You can certainly pass it as a constructor parameter or configure your dependency injection container. So for example, you might have a dependency injection container which says, oh, can you please register, for example, the markdown strategy or markdown list strategy, and register it as, and you specify iList strategy. So this is how it's typically done in the real world. And this is also in a way dynamic because then you have one central point in the DI container where it gets configured, where you can actually switch from one to another. However, if you really don't want to use a dependency injection container, then you can hard code the strategy right into, let's say, a generic argument. So here, for example, what I can say is text processor is going to depend on some list strategy called ls. And then here, when we come to make a list strategy, we just say new ls. Just say new ls like so. And of course, for this to work, we need a couple of constraints. We need to say ls is an iList strategy, and it has a default constructor. But once you satisfy this, everything else is okay, meaning that from now on, we can take that example that we had previously and we can write it differently. So we can say TP equals new text processor, and here we specify the strategy. So here we say we want a markdown list strategy, like so. And then of course, we can once again do TP dot append list, and we can have a new set of items, foo, bar, and baz, for example, and we can write line TP. Now this time round, we cannot just do a clear, we cannot reassign TP once again. So if I now say TP equals new text processor of HTML list strategy, it's not going to work, unfortunately, even though, well, here we go. Here is the error. So essentially you cannot assign it because it's already of type markdown list strategy. And no, you cannot just make it a text processor of iList strategy, because then you're violating the constraint that it has a default constructor, for example. So that's not possible either. So we're going to make a second one. So we're going to say var TP2 equals new text processor, this time with an HTML list strategy, and then we can perform the same kind of operation. So here I just changed TP to TP2, and then if we actually go ahead and execute this, we get exactly the same output. So this is an implementation of the strategy pattern where the definition of which strategy to use is static as opposed to dynamic. So it's defined at compile time, and then you can no longer change it later on.